Greetings, travelers, and welcome to my 100th episode! I honestly can't believe I made it to 100 episodes on this silly show I started because I wanted to talk about my favorite underrated movies, and so many of you have been watching and enjoying my opinions. I wouldn't be here today doing this if it weren't for you guys, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for keeping this channel alive. You guys really do make this show so much fun to work on during my off time, and it warms my heart that so many of you still come back to watch my content. So, a heartfelt thank you from me to all of you. And with that, let's get into my 100th review of the sequel to my favorite horror series, Puppet Master 2. While the first movie wasn't a groundbreaking success, it did gain enough popularity in video store rentals that Full Moon owner, Charles Band, set off to get the next movie into production. The directing chair this time went to David Allen, who is most well known for working as a stop-motion animator, specifically working on movies like The Howling, Willow, and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, as well as being the one who made and worked the most on the puppets' effects in this franchise and several other Full Moon movies before his death in 1999. From what I was able to dig up on the movie's history, this was the first movie to be shot in a large soundstage at the Full Moon backlot, while also returning to the apartment complex that was used in the first movie as the Bodega Bay Inn. Sadly, there were a lot of issues in the direction of the movie that led to the film going 5 days over schedule, as well as the producer and director of the first movie, David Dakota, was constantly fighting and bickering with David Allen as he hated the way the movie's production was being handled. But I can safely say that the product we got was pretty good for a low-budget horror movie, and a sequel to one that came out before the killer doll horror movie craze took off, no less. But I will get into the many positives and some negatives of this movie after I tell you fellow travelers what this movie is about. Two years after the events of the first movie, the puppets are starting to slowly run out of the formula that is keeping them alive and must resurrect their former master, Andre Toulon. Meanwhile, a group of paranormal researchers come to the hotel to investigate the events of the previous movie to see if there is some truth behind what happened. Will the researchers discover Andre Toulon's secret? And what is the Puppet Master's plan for them? And will the investigators stop him and his puppets from whatever evil they have planned? I'm not gonna lie, the cast of this movie is a lot weaker compared to the first movie. Despite the first movie not having that many well-known actors, you can tell that they got some actors that can, well, act. The first movie's actors' performances were a mix of charming and devious that you were able to like them even when most of them were being terrible people. However, this movie's cast of characters were all the same type of people. Scientists that don't believe in the supernatural and are just there to disprove the events of the previous movie. I don't blame the actors for their performances, as it's more the writing that's to blame, but it doesn't excuse the fact that a lot of the characters in this movie are ones that you want to punch in the face for how despicable some of these characters act. I'll get into more details to which characters are good and bad, but first, let's talk about the main reason why these movies are still going. We can't talk about these movies without mentioning the title characters. The puppets make a grand return, as well as their master, who might be a little bit crazy. Though when you've been in the ground for 51 years, you tend to lose a few things, especially your mind. Speaking of the Puppet Master, the actor who plays Andre Toulon, Steve Wells, is one of the few actors in this movie that is actually entertaining. His performance is very over-the-top that it becomes intoxicatingly fun, though I think that his best feature is the design when he is meeting the investigators for the first time, as he is designed to resemble that of the Invisible Man, which I can also see the performance as an homage to the Claude Rains adaptation as well. Plus, I like that this movie does give us the explanation of how Andre found the formula to make the puppets live, and the somewhat connection between him and the main character of this movie. But not only do we get a return of the puppets from the first movie, as well as the amazing effects, which should surprise no one, but we get a new puppet as well, the dreaded fire-spewing puppet, Torch. Just look at this puppet's design! He's got a Kaiser helmet for a head, glowing red eyes, bullets for teeth, a brown colonel's jacket, and of course his signature weapon, his motherfucking flamethrower! He's just such a goddamn cool looking puppet who even gets a majority of the best kills in this movie. Specifically the scene where he kills a kid who's being a little brat and is playing Indiana Jones, whose parents allow him to play with a whip for some reason. But that ends up leading Torch to burning the kid and his family. I commend this movie for the amazing effects and fun kills from this movie that are just as good when compared to the first movie, though that does come with an asterisk at the end. This movie's negatives range from the movie having bad writing and the transfer being ungodly terrible. I'll start by talking about the transfer. The DVD I own from this movie is from the collection that was made when the 9th Puppet Master movie had just been released, and I have to admit that the transfer is pretty bad. It just looks like they took a bad VHS rip of the movie and put it on the DVD, which is only made worse with the terrible sound editing, as you can constantly hear a loud echo when the characters are talking or when you hear the puppets walking around, and it gets very distracting. I'm not sure if this is fixed in later releases of the movie, but if someone out there has one of the newer copies of it, please let me know. As far as the writing goes, I will fully admit that the story is very interesting and creative, but it doesn't help that the characters in this movie are written as infuriating, stupid, and honestly horrible people. For paranormal researchers, they seem to treat the paranormal like it's one big joke that doesn't exist, and treat anyone who might be able to have powers similar to the characters in the first movie like crazy lunatics. Specifically, the main character's brother, Patrick, played by Greg Webb, who is such an arrogant ass that goes after the psychic in their group for no good reason, and when he gets killed by Tunneler, I honestly cheered when he got killed. I get that in horror movies you aren't supposed to care about all of the characters and that the body counts are what the audience comes for, but you should at least try to make them likable enough so that when they do die, you feel something more than joy when they get killed off. The only other thing I will mention is that the camera work in this movie is bad at hiding the puppeteers and the stagehands. There are at least 2 instances in the movie where you can see the puppeteers' hands moving the puppets, and the stagehands that try to keep certain objects from breaking. It's really bad when you can see all the tech hands on set when you're not supposed to, but that honestly could just be the transfer and the fact that the producer and director were constantly fighting that no one was able to get their work done professionally. Despite this movie's poor on-set moments and weak writing, I do think that the moments and scenes with the puppets and Andre Toulon are still the best parts of the movie. The kills and the effects definitely make up for the lackluster performances, and it even has an interesting cliffhanger ending that I wish was explored more in the movies. But at least we got a somewhat expansion to that cliffhanger and the other movies in the comics. Overall, I give Puppet Master 2 a 6 out of 10. It's not the best movie in this franchise, but it's still better than some of the later movies, and it did introduce my second favorite puppet. Well guys, thanks for watching for 100 episodes, and remembering to never judge books by their covers. Here's to the next 100 episodes, and all the good and bad things that come from them. Good night everyone, and see you in the next video.